Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I became the new section manager for the Ohio section on January 1st of 2021. And boy, did I step into it. There's a lot of stuff that Scott's been doing. And Scott's, as I keep saying, some pretty big shoes to follow up on. I'm doing the best I can. My problem is I'm still working full time, so I don't have all day, every day to do everything that he was doing. But I'm learning a whole lot as I'm moving through it and doing some things that I didn't know existed. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. I do enjoy what I do, and I enjoy being a part of the amateur radio community. My call sign is Whiskey Bravo 8 Lima Charlie Delta, and that was my second call sign. I received my novice call sign in 1967, and that novice call sign was WN8AAB, and I could kick myself for letting that one go, but I did. At the end of my 2 years, my license lapsed. And it wasn't 6 months later that I realized that I couldn't live without ham radio. So I came back in with a technician class license and got the call sign WB8LCD, and I've been that ever since. I've had some people tell me that I should, convert to a 1x2 or a 2x1. And I looked a couple of times and just couldn't pull the trigger. At this point, I think it'd be easier for me to change my name than my call sign. So I will forever be known as WB8LCD. As I said, I did get licensed in 1967, so I've been a ham for over 50 years. And at certain times, I like to tell my wife that that's longer than I've been a husband. So I try to get some mileage out of that. I don't necessarily suggest that for everybody, but it's worked a couple times for me, so I'll take it when I can. I grew up on the west side of Cleveland, out in a territory called Parkview, which later became annexed into Fairview Park. And I was out real close to Hopkins Airport, and just south of 480 as you're headed out towards Great Northern Shopping Center is where I would have been. Although it would have been all fields back then, it's grown up quite a bit since. Anyhow, I had a ham that lived behind me, and his name was Stan Hillman, W8FZS. And they had some kids that were my age, and we played all the time together. And we knew that we went over to when we went over to the Hillman's house, there were some places in the house that we couldn't go. And they were kind of neat, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them because we weren't allowed to. And when I got to be 11 years old, I joined the Boy Scouts, and I am an Eagle Scout. But I couldn't wait to join the Boy Scouts and started doing all the things that they were doing. And 1 month, Boys Life magazine came out, and it had an article in it about building a crystal radio set. And I showed that to my dad, and I said, "Hey, can we build one of these?" And my dad, supported me 100% in anything that I ever did. But he did not know a whole lot about radio and electronics. He goes, "Well, why don't you take this over to Mr. Hillman and show him, maybe he can help you with it." I did that. And back in the day when, as a kid, all adults were referred to as Mr., Mrs., Sir, Ma'am, something like that. And I went over there and asked Mr. Hillman if he could help me with it. And he said, "Sure, come on into this room over here," which was one of the rooms I was never allowed in before. And he took my magazine, laid it down, never looked at it, but he heard me say I wanted to build a crystal set. And he just started picking up some pieces, some wire. He found something to wind a coil on. And he just started going to town. And after about 30 minutes of working on this, he goes, "Well, let's plug this in and see what happens." And he put the headphones on me, and boy, I could hear a radio station coming through. And that was really impressive to me. But the whole time I was over there, I heard I didn't recognize any of it, but I heard Morse code in the background. And at one time, while we were working on this crystal set, and he was talking to me and we were doing things, he just all of a sudden said, "Hey, excuse me, I got to answer this guy." And he went over and, sent some code on the key back to these guys. That impressed me as much as anything. That we were having a conversation and that all this noise in the background, he was hearing that. He was listening to it just like it was a different conversation. He was hearing it and comprehending it. And that kind of always stuck with me. And one of the things that inspired me to go ahead and get my ham radio license. And when I got the ham radio license, and up to that point, it was always Mr. Hillman, Mrs. Hillman. That was just the culture I grew up in. And I like to tell this to everybody. One of the things that happened when I got my amateur radio license was I went over to show it to him, and I said, "Mr. Hillman, look what I've got." And he looked down at it, and he said, shook my hand and said, "Congratulations." And he said, "You can call me Stan now." He goes, not everybody else, but you can call me Stan, and this other ham in the neighborhood, you can call him Len. And he made the comment that you're one of us now. And that has stuck with me through the years. It was like I joined a really, really exclusive fraternity. And that just, stuck with me all the time. And I'd have to say that at most times in my life, most of my best friends have been ham radio operators. And I've just enjoyed the hobby for all those years. In those years, other than the 6 months that took me to go from novice to technician, there was about 2.5 years that I wasn't on the air. And that's when my son was in high school, and he became super involved in the aquarium hobby. And for about 3 years, I came home from work every night, and all we did was clean aquarium tanks. And but there's a whole nother story to that I won't bore you with. But once my son left for college, I don't think the brake lights were out at the corner stop sign, and I was putting a station together again. So ham radio has pretty much been it for me through my whole life. And I've made a lot of friends. I've done a lot of really neat things. I've done a lot of things that I'd have never done if I wasn't a ham radio operator. So it's just been that kind of thing. I would have to say that my wife has absolutely no interest in ham radio, and that's okay. I've always told her, don't try to do it, or I don't want you to get a license just for me. If you're not interested in it, don't do it. Now, one of my kids does have a ham radio license. My oldest daughter, Jenny, she lives here with us. She's KD8LIR, so that I got that going for me at least. So anyhow, been a ham for a long time, have had a lot of fun with it. And I've got a presentation here. Back in 2014, I was invited to go up to the 100th anniversary of the ARRL. I was one of the many, many speakers they had up there. And I did a presentation on clubs, building a successful club, having a good club program. And so I got my picture taken in front of W1AW, and that's what I put up here for this little introduction. But what I want to do a little bit tonight is talk a little bit about some history, and then a little bit about where we are as ham radio operators in the U.S., and then what my goals are for my tenure as the Ohio section manager. And I could take all night doing that. If somebody thinks I'm going a little bit too long, just give me a high sign, and I'll try to speed it up a little bit. I want to start out with history, and history is something that I could have cared less with through high school. Probably could have cared less with it through college. Wasn't until later on in life that I became really interested in history, and I'm much more interested in it today than I ever was, um, especially the history of amateur radio. I'm a beer drinker, and I've studied a lot about the history of beer. If you ever need some beer geek information that you'll not get anywhere else, I'm the guy for that. Um, it's another topic I could talk all night on. Um, and, uh, and American history, I just find it all fascinating. But anyhow, here we go. You can't talk about the history of radio without talking about this guy. And I always put that up there with his full name because I think it's kind of funny that he's always referred to as Marconi. Marconi this, Marconi that. And if you look at his first name there and try to pronounce it, you'll see why he's always referred to as Marconi. But he is credited with being the inventor of the first successful wireless telegraph system in 1896. And I always put him out as he's one of the original amateur radio operators because there was nothing else. You were doing it then as a hobby or as an unlicensed person. It just wasn't something that was, you were an amateur. And also ask you to look at the April 25, 1874 through July 20, 1937. And think about all the people in American history who lived in that period in that time period, and think of all the advancements in technology that happened through that period. It was an amazing time, and a lot of real interesting technological advancements happened during that period of time that really pushed us to where we are today. One of the things they talk about in technology changing, they talk about Moore's law, which has to do with transistors, but I think it also has to do with just the general state of technology. We've gone to a certain point, and once you've gotten to that point, the technology starts advancing at a faster and faster pace, and it's just going to keep going faster and faster. I think about my grandmother. She was born about 1901, and she died probably it was in the late 1990s, so almost 100 years old. But during that period of time, she went from walking and riding horses to school to taking an airplane trip in a jet airplane to Hawaii. She went from heating their house with a wood stove to seeing people stand on the moon. And that's just in that period of time. So from 1990, say, till today, technology has just, again, really moved forward in leaps and bounds that are so fast, it's hard to comprehend. And I really think that's why we spend a lot of time doing and thinking and talking about things in our society today, but the people that are really moving it along are the people who are talking about math and science and the technological aspects, because that's what's really pushing our society today. Anyhow, another person who existed in that same time frame, September 1869 through February 17th of 1936, Hiram Percy Maxim. He's just another one of many. I mean, if you think of Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Tesla, the oil barons. I mean, they're just a whole lot of people that really interesting people existed in that time period. But Hiram Percy Maxim, he was there. Was an amateur radio operator in the beginning. And in the beginning, you picked your own call sign. And I think his call sign went through a couple of iterations. I think when he picked his first one, he just started out as Alpha Whiskey. Later, it became 1 Alpha Whiskey, and then later it became W1 Alpha Whiskey. So It went through some iterations, but he's still pretty much got the first one. I'm on the second one. His family was real big into the weapons and firearms and munitions business, and he graduated from MIT with a degree in acoustical engineering when he was 15 years old. So you think about going to MIT, getting an engineering degree when you're 15 years old. This guy was amazing. He's credited with being the inventor of the first commercially successful silencer for firearms. And we also use one of his original inventions today on just about every internal combustion engine that we run, whether it be on a vehicle or a lawnmower or a tractor or whatever. He invented the muffler. So actually, he invented a lot of things through his lifetime, and just that's the kind of spirit and the kind of attitude that people had back then. Math and science ruled everything. They weren't so hung up on emotions and feelings as we are today. And I think that was probably a fascinating time to live in. Anyhow, Hiram Percy Maxim is one of the co-founders, along with Mr. Tuska, of the American Radio Relay League, and they founded that April 6th of 1914. And another real interesting event happened not shortly thereafter. I don't know if you can see the name of the boat there, but you probably all know the name of it. It's the Titanic. And the Titanic and the sinking of the Titanic is probably one of the most influential things that happened on the regulation of radio in radio's history. And the Titanic had a Marconi radio room in it. That's a mock-up of what it would have looked like at the time. But the Titanic sank on April 14th, 1912, 109 years ago yesterday. Actually, depending on what time and what time zone you're talking about, it could have been today. But 109 years ago, on April 14th of 1912. So that was before the American Radio Relay League was founded, but they're both celebrated in the month of April here. So when the Titanic sank, it had left the United Kingdom and was headed for New York, and it was much closer to the shores of New York than it was England. And when it left, it had a Marconi radio set. Marconi was an Italian guy. Most everything that was there was geared towards European conventions. And when the Titanic started to go down, the radio operators, which they were both considered heroes of the Titanic, even though I think only one of them survived, they were sending a distress signal out. And one of the problems was in the United States and later worldwide, the distress signal was SOS. And of course, this was all telegraph, so it was did-it-it, da-da-da, did-it-it. Did-it-it, da-da-da, did-it-it. That's a very a recognizable series of Morse code. But the operators coming from Europe and being in a Marconi station were sending dot-it, dot-it, da-da-da-da, dot-it-it. Much different. And a lot of radio operators in the Northern Hemisphere, they knew what CQ meant. They weren't quite sure about CQD. CQD was the disaster signal that was recognized widely throughout Europe at the time. So in the shores of North America, or in the waters surrounding North America, it wasn't as recognizable as SOS would have been. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here. And a lot of people heard the signal, but didn't know how to react to it. Now, another problem was on ships at the time, it wasn't mandatory that a ship have a radio room. So there were ships going by that, didn't have radios. And there were ships that had radio rooms on them, but the radio officers went off duty at 5 o'clock. They were done for the night, and nobody else came in and manned the radios. So there were ships not too far away at the time that could have been more helpful, but weren't, because they weren't either listening for the signals, they had no one in the radio room, or if they heard the signals, they heard the wrong signals. There was even one ship that went by, and it wasn't too long after they originally hit the iceberg, and they didn't have their radio operators listening. And the passengers on that boat later said, yeah, we went by the Titanic and we saw lights flashing, we heard everybody yelling and screaming, and we just thought to ourselves, wow, what a party they're having on that boat. It never occurred to them that they were in distress. So anyhow, the Titanic went down in April of 1912, and that led immediately to the Radio Act of 1912, which was an act to regulate radio communications. It was the first legislation in the United States and lots of other places that required licenses for radio stations. So that's when one of those times that Hiram Percy Maxim had to change his call sign. The act was passed on August 13th and became effective on December 13th. And at that point in time, enforcement of the Radio Act was under the control of the Department of Commerce and Labor. It was the first time that the government of the United States, or any other government for that matter, seized control of the broadcast spectrum for its allocation among various uses and users. And I just put that into a historical perspective and, kind of asked the question, well, who said it was their right to seize all the radio spectrum and that they would be the persons that would control it? More importantly, they would be the persons or the organization that would monetize it and make huge amounts of money from having it and selling its the slices of radio spectrum that we all use. Anyhow, that's a different discussion. But the Act provided for the licensing of radio operators, a separate frequency for distress calls with absolute priority for distress calls, and 24-hour radio service for ships at sea. It also required that all amateur radio broadcasters to be licensed, and it prohibited them from broadcasting over the main commercial or military wavelengths. And that was another problem that apparently the Titanic had when it was going down and radio signals were being sent out. There was a lot of amateur radio activity in the same frequency ranges, and some people claim that caused interference and caused them to not be able to get their distress signal through. Something else happened shortly after. World War I broke out. And if you remember, the American Radio Relay League was founded in April of 1914. Well, it was in July of 1914 that World War I broke out. The United States tried to stay out of the war, but on April 6th of 1917, which was exactly 3 years after the ARRL was created, America entered the war. And it wasn't until the end of the month before an executive order was issued authorizing the closing of unnecessary radio stations for the duration of the war. It was illegal for private citizens to own transmitters or receivers at that point in time. So from April 30th, 1917, till the end of World War I, we were out of business. And during that time, radio service had come under the control of the United States Navy. So when the war ended, the Navy said, yeah, this is great. We're going to control these things, and we don't want amateur radio operators to ever get on the air again. And they did not want amateur licensing to resume, and they held it up for quite a long time after World War I. The ARRL urged the Navy to reconsider many times, and the Navy just said no, we're not going to allow it. So after failing to get the Navy to allow it to come back to life again, they convinced Massachusetts Representative William Green to push a House resolution directing the Navy to allow amateur radio operators. William Green was chairman of the House Committee on the Merchant, Marine, and Fisheries Committee, and he had worked with the ARRL on several other things. He introduced a resolution on the League's behalf asking the Navy to supply a reason for the continuing ban. And the Navy thought they just weren't going to respond to that. They paid no attention. So getting no reply, a joint resolution in the House of Representatives directing the Secretary of the Navy to remove all restrictions was passed. And in November of 1919, amateur radio operator privileges were restored and operations could start back on the air immediately. One of the biggest problems to getting back on the air is that most of the licenses had lapsed during that period of time. So everyone had to be relicensed as all amateur radio operator stations had gone off. But it wasn't long before people started getting back on the air again. Without Hiram Percy Maxim and the ARRL, amateur radio probably would not exist today, at least not in any type of a format that would be similar to what we have right now. The other important thing that I always ask people to remember is that other than the American Radio Relay League, we have no other advocate protecting our use of the airwaves. They are it. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved with the ARRL, because I feel that they're very important to our continuing experience with the hobby. And without them, it quite possibly could disappear. I don't know if any of you've looked at a frequency allocation chart. You can Google it and you can get a couple offline real easy. But I have a big one that I use in our technician classes, and it goes basically from DC to light and shows every slice of the radio spectrum and who the users are in it. And when you look at all the slices that come out of that across the whole spectrum and see how much radio spectrum amateur radio operators have at our disposal, we have billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars worth of radio spectrum for our personal use. And believe me, every day there are business entities, government entities, military entities that think that they could have a better use of that radio spectrum than what we do. So we could lose a lot of our allocations real quickly if we didn't have the ARRL working on our behalf. And I do know, even through the years before I became involved as a part of the ARRL, they have a very good record of protecting our frequency allocations. They have done an excellent job. And a lot of people don't look at the whole job of what the ARRL actually does. They look at the amateur radio, the publishing that they do. They think about, gee, the ARRL exists to serve its constituents, meaning amateur radio operators. It should be having more contests. It should be, printing more books for less money. There's a lot of things people say, but they discount how effective the American Radio Relay League has been on lobbying government on our behalf to keep our band allocations, and that's vital to our hobby to continue. So I've got some numbers here, and I've got some facts about what ham radio is, and some of these numbers are just out of the air type guesstimates. Some of them are accurate to within one. Total world population, what I could find on the internet, about 7.8 billion peoples. Worldwide hams, and this is just an approximation again, because a lot of countries don't keep records as accurate as what the United States does. About 3 million people in the world are ham radio operators. And that, out of the total population, that is approximately 0.39% of the world population is a ham radio operator. And that's pretty minuscule. The US population is about 330 million people. And as of December 31st, 2020, the US ham population was 771,457. Now that's a much higher percentage of the United States population, but it's still less than 0.25% of all the United States population. The other statistic that I found the most interesting is, as minuscule as those numbers are, of the world ham population, United States hams are a little over 25% of all the hams in the world. So that tells you something. As of March 31st, that number, 771,457, has grown to 778,768. So in the first 3 months of 2021, we've grown in the United States by 7,311. And that's active licenses. So, obviously there have been some hams that have fallen off the list as you read the silent key pages of QST every month. You'll know that some are just gone. Licenses have expired, but yet we've still had a net gain. So I think that's a good thing that we need to keep going here. This I couldn't really update it, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. Everybody thinks about some maybe other countries that might have large ham populations. When you look at Japan, and the most accurate numbers I could get for them were from 2015. In 2015, they had 435,581 amateur radio operators, a higher percentage of their population, not by a lot, but still a lot less total hams than what we have in the United States. Just for comparison, Canada has about 70,000 hams. France has about 14,000 hams. The United Kingdom about 75,000. And even though this number goes all the way back to 2000, Slovenia, while they only have about 6,500 hams, It's the highest percentage of population of any country that I could find at 0.31%. So we're all, in the minority. As of December 28th, when you looked at all the hams out of that 771,000, I'm really going to only key in on the tech, general, and extra because they're the only ones that we can look at today. But 50.88% of all amateur radio operators hold a technician class license. 23% hold a general class license, and just slightly under 20% hold an extra class license. I looked at that to see if those numbers have changed much, and they haven't. The percentages stay about the same. Give me a second here. California, and in the United States, California has the highest population of ham radio operators of all the states. And this is for the state, which includes all the sections that are in California. As of December 28th, they had a total of 106,229 hams. Almost 61.5% of their hams had a tech class license. That's higher than the national average. Everybody thinks of California as being the technical mecca of the United States, but yet they have the lowest number here. I'm going to have to answer that on the third call. But, and they have a lower amount of extra class hams. In 2021, their total went from 106,229 down to 106,055. So they're actually losing total hams in the state. Ohio has the 5th largest number of hams in the country. And from 2020, we had 46% techs, 25% general, 22% extra. So we've actually done a little bit better than they have. We gained about 194 hams over on April 1st or March 31st of 2021. We went from 28,174 to 28,368. So Ohio actually is doing pretty good. I just threw this in for comparison purposes. At the end of last year, my home club, PCARS, we had 193 active members, of which I think the interesting stat here is that 21% were technician class licenses, 26% were general class licenses, and 52% were extra class licenses. That to me is an important factor, because I really think that in amateur radio, when you get your technician class license, that's like getting your learner's permit to drive on the highway. It's just the first step in. You really don't want to stay there. Yet over 50% of the hams in the United States, that's where they're at. I really think the general class is where the largest percentage of hams should be. And when you think about the testing requirements, going from a technician to a general is not that big a leap. It's pretty easily done. Yet the privileges you gain going from a technician to a general class license are huge. Now, going from a general to an extra class license, the testing, that's a real bear for very limited extra privileges. But hey, if you're going to be a ham radio operator, you might as well go to the top and do the best you can do. So I was kind of proud of that. Actually, at the end of the At the end of the year, we were there, excuse me, at 193. As of March 31st, our total paid membership is at 185. That's gone down a little bit. We did lose, well, we had 22 members active last year that did not renew their membership, but we had 14 new members come in. So we're down net 8 so far, but hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have convinced a few more to come back in and made a few more new hams. Out of that 770 plus thousand hams in the United States, as of December 2019, 156,000 were members of the ARRL. Now that to me is not a very good number. That's barely 20% of all US hams are a member of the one organization that keeps us viable. That's why I say I'm a shill for the ARRL. I think we really need to work on that. As of March 31st, that actually went up to 159,659. So we did gain 2,904 ARRL members from December of 2019 to March 31st of 2021. So, yeah, that was a little over a year's worth, but it's still nice to see that the number is going up there. In Ohio, and this was as of December 31st, Ohio hams are doing about the same as the national average when it comes to belonging to the ARRL. As of March 31st, the total hams in Ohio was 28,368. So our total numbers have gone up, and ARRL members was at 5,930. So that's going up. I'd say the percentage is probably about the same, but at least it's growing. Just to give you an idea, the largest sections in the ARRL, Ohio is the largest section with, well, as of now, 5,930. As of December 31st, the second largest section was South Texas. The third largest was Western Washington, which I'd have never guessed that. And the fourth largest was Virginia, which I could have believed that because, there's a lot of activity from there. Looking at the ARRL and the last stats we had for them were from 2019. They still haven't got their 2020 annual report out yet. But total revenue for the ARRL in 2019 was just a little over $15 million, which I sat on the board of a 501c3 organization here in Portage County for about 4 years. They dealt with mental health issues and the population that suffers from those. We had a larger budget than that, which I find truly amazing. The membership dues from the members, approximately $6,770,000. So that is the largest source of income that the ARRL has. They get about half of that, $3.3 million from publication sales, about $1.8 million from advertising, and about $1.7 million from contributions. And the rest is just miscellaneous things. So a number of years ago, and I had a statistic on a screen earlier that compared us to the NRA. The NRA is another membership organization that has just slightly less than 5 million members. although that could be changing on a daily basis with the events going on in our country. And they wanted to, and they have a much larger revenue monies that they have to deal with. But I think it was about 10 years ago, they sent their political action people, their lobbyists, to Newington, Connecticut to talk with the ARRL because they were impressed with how effective the ARRL lobbyists were at keeping the government at bay, so to speak, and from taking away privileges from us. And they wanted to know what the ARRL was doing, how they worked. Now, they spent a couple of days there just grilling people. And I think that was a real testimony to the effectiveness of the ARRL in working on our behalf in keeping amateur radio alive for us. So I like to put this out here, and you know, it's just a couple of words on a piece of paper, and I don't know how you read that, but a lot of people look at it and they say, wow, opportunity is nowhere. And I think what we really have to do is just put a break in one of the words and an exclamation point after it and look at it as opportunity is now here. I think what has happened in our society over the past year and 3 months now has been a huge shift in all the paradigms that we work under. Just like we're doing this Zoom meeting right now, and we've gone to Zoom meetings because we couldn't get together over the past year. But I have a feeling that even once we do start getting back together again, we're still going to be doing a Zoom meeting as part of that, because there are going to be people that say, well, you know what, I want to participate in the meeting, but don't want to have to drive home after 9 o'clock when it's dark. I don't want to have to go somewhere when I could participate from my home. Yeah, this is a great opportunity for us. It's a great opportunity to keep more of our members engaged with the club activities, because they don't have to go out and do things when we're not there. It's given us a way that we can attract people from a much larger audience to participate in some of the things that we have to offer, because through Zoom, we can get people to join our club meetings from all over the country, from all over the world for that matter. It just takes a little bit of marketing of what we have to offer and finding the right people to come in. So I think a lot of clubs that particularly specialize in doing certain things, there are clubs that specialize in doing fox hunts. I think they're going to have an opportunity to take the fox hunting technology, just the whole story about that, which is not something that everybody does, but they'll have an opportunity to get a much larger audience, because the people who want to do that are going to be looking for some place that specializes in that. I think a lot of clubs are still going to be the general purpose clubs, and I think that's fine. I'm just saying that if you become a niche, have a niche interest that people could be interested in, it would be something that would maybe bring you a little bit more membership, or maybe even just in the local area, give you a little bit chance to attract other members from around Northeast Ohio. I also think it's an opportunity to reach out into spaces that we haven't been able to get to before. And I think specifically, everybody talks about, we got to get the kids into our hobby. We got to get the kids into our hobby. But one of the things that we've said over the last number of years was, it's tough to go out there and get involved in the things that the kids are doing, because we can't go to the schools and do it because the schools want us to be fingerprinted and badged and background checked. And, and if you get involved, you got to be careful of, what you say to who and how. Lots of things could happen. So it's a tough nut to crack. But now, all our kids are at home. And there are a lot of kids at home who are probably not getting the type of educational assistance that they need, particularly in the areas of math and science. And these are areas that are kind of our strong points. I don't know how many of you, like me, have grandkids that are in grade school, junior high school. We can set up opportunities for those kids to get a couple of their friends and say, hey, you know what? We can help you with math. We can help you with science. We can bring you into areas that you wouldn't have thought of before. And once we start doing that and getting kids interested, then we can start expanding it into amateur radio, because amateur radio touches on all those things. Amateur radio touches on math and science, but it also touches on a lot of other subjects that schools are supposed to be teaching our kids, like language studies. we talk to a lot of people with a lot of different language skills. It gives us an opportunity to learn what other people are doing. It gives us an opportunity to learn geography. I have not been a big active participant in ARRLs for the last 15 years. And I never was before that either. But anyhow, since January 1st, I've been checking in on some ARRLs nets, and Ohio ARRLs nets, particularly the HF net that covers the whole state. That's like, wow, we have a whole bunch of counties in Ohio and a whole bunch of cities, and I don't necessarily know where all of them are. So it's forcing me to look at that map and figure out, okay, this county's over here and that one's over there. It's helping me learn. And I think we need to express to the kids that, hey, this is a great way to make learning fun and to have worthwhile activities while you're doing it. So I am beginning to run a little long here, but nobody's been giving me any signals yet. My first goal for ham radio, or for my tenure as section manager in Ohio, is of all the people who have a ham license already, I want every single one of those to get engaged with the hobby and have fun with it, because that's one of the key things that we can do to keep people in the hobby is have fun. And I've heard it said many times, the most fun you can have in ham radio is getting on the air. And you just got to make a time. You've got to force yourself to do it. But it's like a lot of things in life. Once you do it and you have fun doing it, you'll want to do it more. So it's a great hobby. And there are so darn many different ways to have fun with ham radio. I couldn't even list them on one sheet of paper, but this is Ed, Kate, IV at Ohio State Parks on the Air. And Ed loves contesting. Doesn't matter whether it's Ohio State Parks on the Air, field day, whatever, he's going to be there. And I've had some go-arounds with him. He's a great friend. But, I've said, when I'm looking at it from a club standpoint, we're doing field day, I got to make sure that everybody's there having fun. And Ed's attitude is, what could be more fun than winning? Okay, yeah, he gets real intense about it, and wants to get everybody, into that mindset that, you got to keep going. And we've actually done very well. The team for Ohio State Parks on the Air, we've won it the last 2 years. And it's just because we go at it with the attitude that we want to win. Field day, the same thing. We have a wonderful field day experience with PCARs. Although this year, I guess I'm going to be out in the car driving around, stopping in at just about every field day site that is out there in the state of Ohio. So it'll be a different field day for me, but it's where you start having fun, is getting your members out, getting them involved, and making sure everybody has an opportunity to get on the air and have fun with it. Another thing that hams like to do is hams like to build things. And if you get a bunch of hams together and you have a kit bashing session, and there's a lot of small kits that you can get, particularly if you like QRP. Not everybody does, but all kinds of neat little kits that you can get and build and have fun with. This was a kit build that I put on once, excuse me, for a club. And we were building, and this is just another one. We built power pole junction boxes so that you could have a distribution center for your power pole connectors to have a power supply that would run more than one piece of equipment. And this was the second version of it. We put a meter on the front of it so you could track your voltage while you were doing it. But people had fun doing that. And it was simple. And it was the kind of thing that people could come in, work for an hour or two, and leave with a piece of amateur radio equipment that they built themselves that was working. That's a great thing. My goal number 2 is that I want to get clubs. I want to get people in the mindset that we need to move up the ladder. I understand not everybody's going to want to do it, but we need to move people along in the hobby as much as we can. We need to get them up to having the general class license. And that's where every person who comes in needs to have other people to work with. Being a member of a club, excuse me, is the best thing that you can do to improve your enjoyment in amateur radio. Belong to a club that's doing things and being active, and it's a natural that you're going to have fun with them. But the other thing is, we as the club have to make sure that we are all inclusive to everybody that wants to come and have fun with us. It's a little bit different to reach out sometimes to people that are a little hard to reach out to, but sometimes those people have been some of the best club members that I've seen. I could give examples, I won't, but open your eyes, open your hearts to maybe some people that you wouldn't normally do that with. And when they have fun and you have fun and other people start having fun and you're doing it all together, it's going to increase the experience, tenfold for you. I also feel like every ham should be a member of the ARRL. I'm biased, I understand, but I think you get a lot out of it if you take advantage of it. And even if you don't do anything but read the magazine, your money's going to support the lobbying efforts that pretty much keep us all on the air. And lastly, I think what I would like to see, particularly in Ohio, in the Ohio section, is that amateur radio works hard to create a positive public image for ourselves. Right now, the problem is we aren't the ones that are creating the image of who we are. We let other people do that for us. And when other people do it, and particularly when they don't know what amateur radio is all about, they don't necessarily give us the best image that you can get. I got a couple of pictures here that if you've done things and if you've invited someone out and they go to Dayton, for instance, they come back, what are they going to take a picture of? Oh, look at this. This was the goofiest car in the parking lot. And 99% of the population is going to look at that and say, my God, I don't need a car that looks like a porcupine and it's filled with electronic junk. Yeah, that doesn't look like fun to me. We need to create our own image by showing the public who we are. And interestingly enough, the ARRL has picked up on that same idea, and their first effort was putting out this press release on World Amateur Radio Day. That is Sunday, April 18th. And one of the biggest things that they did in that release, they released the information to us. It's our job to get it out there into the community. And what they've done for the first time here, they wrote press releases that all we have to do is take and put our club name in and our club contact and send that press release off to our local newspapers, our local radio stations. That's what we really need to do, is we need to let other people know that what we're about, and let them know on our terms, not someone else's terms. And again, just in the times that we've been living, how many other civic type organizations do you know that are just like us? They have meetings and they're looking for a meeting program. We could provide a lot of interesting programs for those organizations. What we need to do is let them know that we're here and let them know that we're available. And you'll have some fun. You'll meet some interesting people. You'll maybe get some people interested in joining us. And the most important aspect of that whole experience is you're out there, you're putting a positive face on amateur radio in the community because we're providing a service to them. So that's, pretty much what I really think we really need to be all about. I talked about this already, putting ourselves out in front of the kids. And that's just a shot of the social room at the PCARS Club that I'm ending on. We have a lot of guys that come. We have a lot of fun. It's a big part of our life. Now, we haven't been there in a year and a half, but we're really looking forward to going back there and getting together with our friends and having a good time. And I really think amateur radio is the greatest hobby in the world. And I hope that you guys will have a lot of fun with it and make it work for all of us.